Hi everyone, you are listening to She Leads with Carly. Our guest today is Nancy Wang. Nancy is the head of AWS Backup at Amazon and the founder of Advancing Women in Product, a nonprofit aiming to bridge the technology gender gap by empowering women to take on these leadership roles. We chat about the importance of mentors, inclusion and diversity in the workplace, and dealing with imposter syndrome in the workplace as well. Nancy's key advice is being comfortable not knowing everything, but still maintaining the confidence in yourself that you belong there. So much more from Nancy. I hope you enjoy this chat. Hello, Nancy. Thank you so much for coming on to She Leads today. I'm so excited to just get to know you better, hear your story. So thank you for coming.
Well, thank you so much, Carly, for having me. I'm excited to see if I can share things that will be helpful to the other women and folks who are listening and watching this podcast.
Yeah, definitely. So, Nancy, you currently work at Amazon Web Services as the head of AWS Backup, and you also have extensive product management experience, whether it's at Google or at Rubrik. And probably what I'm most excited about to talk not only about your journey, but also founding Advancing Women in Product, a nonprofit that's really aiming to bridge the technology gender gap by empowering women to really take on these leadership roles in tech, in product. And you guys you have an incredible community all around the world. And you do this whether it's through educational programs, mentorship, networking opportunities, or really these partnerships with these world-class top tech companies. So we'll obviously get into that and your inspiration behind it. But what I'd love to start is tell me a little bit, take me back to when you were just graduating from UPenn with a bachelor's in computer science. At this moment, or at least at UPenn in college, what did you imagine your career being like? Where did you see yourself going? And really, what questions were you asking yourself?
Yeah, wow, that takes me a while back. Especially speaking with you, Carly, I'm hesitant to mention my graduation year, so we'll keep that a secret.
That's okay.
I think in all seriousness, when I speak to other women who are looking for career mentoring advice or just general tips, right, they often have a notion. And what I think is maybe this notion that society has taught us to believe, which I honestly think is incorrect, which is, hey, my career really has to be linear, right? I need to be doing X at this point in time in order for me to do Y, in order for me to become Z, right? I mean, yes, that's true in the grand scheme of things. There is an order and a progression to things. However, actually what I find to be the most interesting candidates that walk in through the door when I'm interviewing as a hiring manager are actually people who've had multiple careers in their life. So I'll give a couple examples, myself included. When I graduated college studying engineering, I wanted to build things. But with that said, I knew my passion wasn't in directly writing code, right? There's much better people and people who are passionate about that in actually being computer scientists. Where I felt my passion was, at least at the time, was actually developing technology policy. So my first job actually out of college was working in Washington, D.C. for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. That was also a fellowship with the White House. So working directly with the CTO of HHS at the time. His name is Todd Park. And for those of you who haven't looked up Todd Park or know who he is, he's a very phenomenal founder, especially in the healthcare tech space. So he's the founder of Athena Health, among other healthcare initiatives. And so he was the CTO of HHS at the time. And what I worked with him was two projects. One was to build healthdata.gov, which is, if you look, it's still available online. It's one of the largest repositories in the world for healthcare data. So you can look at disparities data, economic data around healthcare insurance. And it was really the department's way of making sure that all the treasure troves of data that it had, think exabytes upon exabytes of data between the CDC, NIH, FDA, so on and so forth. A lot of people actually may not be aware that all of those groups or names that we hear so often, especially in COVID times, like the CDC, are actually part of the HHS umbrella. They're called operating divisions. And so, as you can imagine, each operating division, especially those like the FDA or NIH or CDC, will often have its own treasure troves of data. So making sure that we can present all of this information and make it accessible to whether it's academic researchers, people in industry or simply curious individuals like you and me, right, we have access to that. So I definitely encourage everyone watching this or listening to this to play with those data sets and to toggle through the filters. So that was a really important project that we worked on. Yeah. The second part was part of the larger Affordable Care Act movement, which is how do we provide accessible healthcare to underrepresented individuals? And it's there, I think, that my passion around helping underserved communities came from, because part of it was coming up with healthcare policy, healthcare tech policy in particular, that could actually measure what is the disparity in the level of healthcare access received in, let's say, for example, reservations, right? IHS or Indian Health Service serves those specific underserved populations, or let's say Latinos or Blacks in the U.S. And it was really, I think, disheartening, but also very fruitful to be able to see all of the disparities being visualized through data. So those were the two main projects that I worked in while in Washington, D.C. And after that, kind of started my big tech career at Google. So first project there was, working on large scale sort of fiber optics deployments across the country. So again, bring connectivity, internet access to underserved populations.
Wow. Yeah. And so during this time, I'm curious, did you have people kind of guiding you and mentoring you along the way, or like what was kind of navigating your path? When was it the moment where even like working for the government where you're like, okay, I think it's time for me to explore tech more and dive deeper into data, product, tech, and go into that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And part of it, I have to be honest, I think especially when I early on started my career, I didn't really know the strength or the power of having advocates or mentors or sponsors. Yeah. So, I sort of got advice here or there. There were some, kind folks who helped me along the way, but there wasn't really a concept of a mentor early on in my career.
Yeah.
So that's why, as you can see, I technically had two careers, one in the government and one in technology. And I sort of kind of went around, right, explore different areas. I'm glad I did, because it frankly makes, my experiences fun to talk about and to share with other people. Yeah. But it wasn't really until I started at Google that I was like, wow, there is this path, right? I mean, big tech companies, I'm sure you guys are aware, they're very regimented with how they level people and how people move up the ranks, right? You get literally assigned a number, and that number grows the more senior you are. Right. So it's very easy to sort of see other folks getting promoted and advancing. And seeing that made me realize how important a mentor is, which is why when I was at Google, I founded the organization that you so kindly introduced me with, Advancing Women in Product, because mentors and especially sponsors who actually put some of their personal capital into making sure you succeed is crucial to advancing one's career.
Yeah. And so kind of going into AWIP and Advancing Women in Product, obviously the inspiration comes from really the gap that you noticed in the gender gap between male and females and who's taking on these product and tech roles. So at Google, from my understanding, you were the only and the first female PM there, if I stand corrected.
Sure. I would say Google Fiber. There was a small tweak in the publication because, as we all know, the first female PM at Google is Marissa Mayer. But yeah, I mean, and this actually brings up a really key point, which is, the area of Google that I worked in, specifically, Google Fiber and, access and energy. Yeah. And this is not something, that is just really isolated to Google, but across the industry and really across tech in general, is as you sort of move to more technical roles, you see the representation take a pretty steep nosedive. And by technical roles, I mean, product management, engineering, data science, et cetera. And today, I'm really proud to say that we have all of those individuals and careers represented within the AWIP community.
Amazing.
So I would say, with the lack of representation, it brings up, seeing is believing, right? And it's very true, is when you first start out in your career and you're less than 5 years out of college, you want to see, okay, in the future, if I work hard and I move up the chain, who can I really become, right? What is the limit? And for a lot of people, right, you want to say that the sky's the limit, But unfortunately, if you don't see people who look like you or who you identify with, and it's not just gender, right? Could be ethnicity, could be sexual orientation, could be religion, could be a number of things, right? You then believe that your limit is somewhere not at the top, but rather in the middle, or even worse, near more of the junior levels. And so that's why the phenomenon, and it's written about a lot in Harvard Business School reviews or different cases or reports, is there is a glass ceiling that exists for women where after a certain point, right, you see a lot of women, and you can look on LinkedIn if you don't believe me, right, where it's senior product manager to senior product manager to senior product manager from multiple companies. And so where does that inflection point come from then, right? Where does someone then actually take a step and say, I think this woman is very capable and we should give her a chance to be a director of product?
Yeah. And so, okay, I can go in a bunch of different directions, but I do want to hear first, before kind of the advice for females up and coming, how was your experience being the only female in the room often, and even at Rubrik as well as Google Fiber? How did you ever feel that you had to overcompensate and really had to prove yourself more than your male counterparts, or did you ever feel sometimes imposter syndrome and you were like, okay, I just need to get through this? Or like, how did you build that mental model during it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And honestly, something that I coach a lot of folks on the AWIP team through. And just a small plug there. As part of the AWIP promise to, volunteers who join the team and give their time to help out the broader community, part of our agreement is also leaders like myself on the board will take time out and do regular mentoring sessions for those volunteers. And it's just our way of creating a give back circle, right? So that's actually one of the most common aspects that I work on with my mentees as part of AWIP. I think in the broader, perspective, like, yes, right? I mean, it's just psychology. When you're not part of the in-group or the majority group and you're part of the out-group, you will feel isolated, right? And isolation can lead to feelings of inadequacy, maybe imposter syndrome, right? As you mentioned it. And so it's only natural that in a dynamic where men greatly outnumber women, and I mean, these statistics, you don't need to hear it from me, right? 7-1, sometimes 8-1, sometimes even 10 or more to 1, right? You can feel very isolated. And I think especially in the beginning of my career, right, as one of the few, you can say females or people of color or immigrant in the room, it can be hard because you feel like, hey, you start to doubt yourself. And what I'm saying, right, truly the fact, or, should I do more homework, right? And so ultimately, what helped me overcome some of that imposter syndrome was just being very clear and being even, I would say, triple, quadruple check my facts and my answers before I bring them up in the room, that I could easily defend that. And as soon as my peers, right, and this is also part of building your reputation among your peers and leadership is, okay, Nancy seems to know what she's talking about. And then it becomes easier, right? You build that rapport slowly over time, but you also end up building that trust. And so you no longer have to, triple check or quadruple check. You can, easily bring up your ideas in a boardroom.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a big thing that you also touched on is the idea of relationships and like building that relationship with the people around you and really gaining that trust and then that credibility and everything else that comes with it. So I think that's also very important. And so my next question is really, so you mentioned how there's definitely a big difference between how males approach their jobs and females, but even taking a step forward or a step backwards even is like applying for jobs. And so like usually females, when they see like a whole list of skills, they see, oh, I have that one, but I don't have like these two, and I have that one, so I'm not going to apply. Whereas like I think that there's statistics show that like the mental model from a male perspective is really like, oh, I have one or two of them, I'll still apply. So how do you, what advice do you have for females who, may not think that they're completely qualified or really have everything set for them for that product role or that tech role, but that they should still take that chance and apply?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to, again, I think mentality and psychology, right? Is in let's say this, kind of aggressive job market, right? Where,
Yeah.
as you know, right, because of COVID, many companies have started laying off individuals. I think it's still fortunate that some companies, are still hiring, right? But I think especially in that sense, you have to be very confident in your own candidacy. And that also translates to how successful you are in the job, right? Because there is not going to be a situation, right? Myself included, I ask for help many times throughout the day. Hey, can you help me with this? Or I don't quite understand that. Can you please explain that to me, right? You have to be comfortable not knowing everything, right? And that people who can only do things once they know every nitty-gritty detail or like every nook and cranny are most likely not going to be successful, because that means they're spreading themselves a little bit too thin. So my advice there is, if you have obviously, don't go for looking at jobs that say, we need like 15 years of experience managing large scale teams when you've only been in IC. I think that is a little bit of a stretch. But with that said, right, if you see job requirements that are like, okay, SQL knowledge, for example, to do a data analysis, business acumen or experience, let's say, dealing with customers, and you may not have the SQL, I don't think it's actually that much of a stretch to apply and say, I'm starting to learn SQL because I'm really excited about this job. And look, here's the progress I've made. I can write, canned queries right now, and I'll be able to write nested queries next, right? And that's just an example. But that shows the hiring manager that you're really excited about the job position and that you're ready to learn, which frankly is something that, as a hiring manager myself, I look for, because no one's ever going to know everything they need to know. Right. And the propensity to learn and the curiosity is what is going to make someone successful.
Definitely. I love that. I think that's a great tip. And also just that confidence and having that mentality going into it, I think is so important. So talking a little bit more about AWIP, where is it today, and where do you see the future of AWIP and the impact that it could truly have on in this tech space?
Yeah, I mean, so recently, just to do a plug for, our partners here, is we had a group, actually a PR firm based out of Europe. They're called Diffusion PR. They agreed to help amplify our voice pro bono, which is huge, right? Because if you think about, PR firms' resources, it can be very limited, but they chose actively to help us so we can reach more people and create more of an impact. And you can see it from just numbers, right? Being a PM, let's go back to it being data driven, is AWIP was founded in 2017. April. So we're barely, 2.5 years old, more like a little, few months past 2. Right. In that time span, we've grown from 1 chapter in San Francisco to 7 chapters, including San Francisco, Seattle, Boston, New York, Paris, Chennai. We have Bangalore starting up. We'll have DC in October. So it really grew nationwide and worldwide. Right. And that's actually a really important perspective. It's not just US focused. We're also in Europe. We're also in APAC. And those are the perspectives that really make AWIP special. And then in terms of members, we grew from having a couple hundred in just San Francisco via, in-person events to now 16,000 globally, where we also have members in cities where we don't have chapters, like Sydney or Melbourne or Beijing. Right. And yet they tune in to watch our recordings or read our blogs. So the impact has really been worldwide. And so my eventual vision, especially for AWIP, is start out as a product manager. And actually recently I've moved away from directly managing product managers to now managing a business unit as an acting general manager. So what that means is I have a head of product reporting to me, as well as a head of engineering. And so that is a different role from being a line product manager. So in that sense, we also have different groups now joining AWIP, such as women in engineering, women in data science, women in product design, as well as women in product marketing. So we have the entire tech umbrella. And so I would just say, what is the vision of AWIP 5 years down the road? It's really being the platform for every woman, as well as underrepresented minority, regardless of how you define minority, to find the skills and the mentorship, sponsorship that they need to succeed and to move up in the career ladder.
Incredible. I love that. I think you're building something that I mean already it's proven to show how impactful it is. So I think that's so incredible. So now you are at Amazon. So tell me a little bit about you deciding to go to Amazon and really your role at Amazon a little bit more, and then I'll ask you a little bit more about it after. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I would say, again, joining Amazon was actually very much related to AWIP, and I'm happy to share that story because it is very, it speaks a lot to my personal philosophy around the importance of having a sponsor. So my sponsor, and I'm super fortunate to have her, her name is Tatiana Mahmood. In fact, I should say Dr. Tatiana Mahmood. She has a PhD from Berkeley, and she is now the Chief Product Officer at Nextdoor. When I met her, she was a general manager at AWS, and we had met at a AWS happy hour, right? Went up to her. She seemed really interesting. We had a conversation. In fact, I think the people at the venue had to kick us out because we were still talking after they had closed the bar. But, we just really clicked, right? And this was part of forming relationships and making sure you keep in touch with people. So that was back in 2016, even before I joined Rubrik. And so you'll notice that Rubrik was the next company I joined, not Amazon. So even though I didn't end up joining Amazon back then, we kept in touch, and she actually became an executive advisor and still is for AWIP. Through that time period after Rubrik, she introduced me to a phenomenal woman leader. Her name is Sandy Carter. She's a vice president of public programs at Amazon as well. And Sandy was looking for more women to join Amazon in general. So made that intro, and here I am. So that just speaks to the power of sponsors. Not that you need to get something from them right away. And I think that's if I had to say anything, advice for women is do not expect immediate results. I mean, if you get them, that's great. But the real point of that is building lasting relationships, because you never really know when it's going to pay off or how often it's going to pay off, right? Plus, being able to understand and get to know your sponsor at a human, at a personal level only deepens that bond and also, mutual benefit.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's awesome. And then, so now I love asking my guests really the idea of failure and the perception of failure, and really building a mental model for what it means to fail and really using it as a learning experience. So given your career and really founding AWIP or working at Amazon, what is your perception of failure, and really what's an example maybe from a challenge you've encountered and how you've really responded to it?
Yeah, so look, failure can be many things, right? And oftentimes I think as, women, we hold ourselves to a very high standard, and we are our harshest critic, right? We beat ourselves up when we don't achieve, right, what we're meant to. So I would say, I think at first, and this is, speaking to my own experience at Rubrik, I had never sort of worked on, I would say, as technical of a product, and the learning curve was really steep. Right. And so I, being the go-getter I am, I asked my manager to put me in front of customers 3 weeks in to see if I could answer questions. Right. And even though it was one question out of quite a few that I couldn't answer, I took that pretty personally. And part of it was, in some things, right, you can sort of ask others or leverage others to help you get through. And this is why I think there is such a barrier to women entering technical product roles, is that it's really hard to understand, concepts like, let's say, distributed systems or immutable ledgers, or understanding, what is consistency, right? Or did the different levels of consistency if you don't have an engineering background, or if you're not going to spend, hours and hours in learning these concepts. So same thing with technical products. I really had to learn backup recovery space, which is a very nuanced space, from scratch, from literally reading manuals, playing with command line, and playing with different products. And so that was just an experience that I think I took really hard at first. But afterwards, it was like, okay, so this is how to be, a product manager and also a leader in the technical product space.
Yeah. And it's almost, have you also, what skills do you think a successful PM needs to have? And are those all easy, not easy to learn, but they're you can learn them rather than, I have to have this a part of me. So talk a little bit more about the skills that every PM should have and kind of the path to get there.
Sure. So to answer the question, I'll use Amazon's leadership principles, because I think they are actually really good in describing different skills or core competencies. I would say one is for sure, you know, the ownership aspect, right? Is as a PM, you're really the product owner, right? Yeah. So which means that if the product fails, product breaks, if the product doesn't ship, it's all on you. And so making sure that you really have that 360 view of your product and you treat it almost like, your baby, right? This is yours and you need to be a true owner, which means, hey, if your product fails, like for example, the night before July 4th, right? I get paged at 1:30 a.m. for an escalation. You get up and you log into your console and you see what's going on, right? And you fix it and you stay awake until 3 a.m. when your team fixes it, right? Wow. That's ownership, right? Yeah. Making sure that you're there when your customers need you. With that said, easily segue to customer obsession, because you probably shouldn't be a product manager if you don't want to talk to customers, right? Not the right role for you. But if you like being customer obsessed, or you like being the voice of the customer, I do think PM could be a good career path for you. Yeah. Leads me to the next one is learn and be curious. So like I said, no one knows everything about everything possible at any given point in time. Yeah. So the ability to learn quickly, be quick on their feet, and also admit when they don't know something is really, I think, key to product management success. There's 14 leadership principles. I don't feel like covering them all, nor should we. But I do think out of the 14, I would say those top 3 are really important. Now, the last one is depending on if you're a technical product manager, which was my career ladder before I moved into an acting GM role. Yeah. But there's also a business-minded product manager. So depending on which ones you are, you will be expected to dive deep, which is another leadership principle. So whether it's diving deep into the technical aspects of your product, or diving deep into, let's say, a profit and loss statement and understanding your cost margins if you're more on the business side, whichever one it is, right? You are expected to be the expert, and you will be asked very in-depth questions that you need to answer very quickly.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think I'm going to take notes after this, and I'm excited to learn more. But those were so helpful, even the top 3 and everything. So I appreciate that. And then, okay, honestly, I could talk to you for hours, but for the sake of time, I'm going to end off with the 2 fun questions. So first, Nancy, tell me a little bit more. What is your passion or hobby that you have that's really unrelated to your work?
Yeah, so well, maybe I'll, if I can, give 2 examples. One is it's an activity that really brought me out of my shell, and so for that, I actually have to thank a fellow, Stanford alum, Crystal Lee, for being my pageant mentor. So one little known fact is I competed in pageants, and I competed in the 2016 Miss California USA pageant as a representative for San Francisco. So it was a really great experience, honestly, just the sheer willpower to train and be at that fitness level, because I think a lot of folks, when they look at pageants, it's, the tiaras, the toddlers and tiaras, right? Crazy, people think about, butt glue that was covered in John Oliver's segment, or, hairspray. Yes, it is all of that, but also a lot more that they don't see, which is, getting to that level of fitness where you can go on the catwalk in your bikini. It requires a lot of just willpower, right? Yeah. And saying no to cheeseburgers on the weekends. But jokes aside, right? The ability to describe yourself to a panel of judges can be really scary, right? In 20 seconds, being able to answer questions. I think mine was about a space elevator, right? In 30 seconds, because they were like, oh, you're an engineer, so clearly you must know this question. It's really daunting, right? But I think all of that, plus actually the community service aspects that come with it, such as representing your community at different events, all of that kind of ties together into why I did this, right? Is at the core, if we had words to describe me, would be breaking stereotypes. I love breaking stereotypes, and in fact, I think I make it my life motto or life mission to do that, because when people look at me, they don't immediately think she works in infrastructure software, right? Or she leads this team and manages this org of dozens of people. No, right? Instead, I often get a surprise whenever I turn my camera on, which honestly at this point I more use it as a let's break stereotypes moment. So again, I competed because folks were like, software engineer cannot possibly compete in beauty pageants. Well, I did, and I won. So there's that. Amazing. And then I would say, nowadays, now that I've retired from pageants in a few years, is I really like to horseback ride. So I grew up in Wisconsin, and I love the outdoors. And horseback riding is actually one of the great ways that you can explore nature, such as on trails or horseback rides on beaches, without having to walk. So if you're lazy like me, you might want a horseback ride through new scenic areas.
Yeah, I love it. And the pageants, it's so cool. And I agree. I think it takes a lot of, not only willpower, but that confidence. I think it teaches a lot of life skills afterwards that I'm sure you can see in your work today. So as my last question, which I would honestly be okay with the pageant answer for this one as well, but it's up to you, which is what's a weird or talent that you have, a weird or fun talent that no one else really knows about? So I'm going to go first, and I'm going to show you my talent, which is catching blueberries into my mouth. All right, so we're gonna do a little demo for you. Okay. There we go. So that's my
That's
blueberry.
Really cool. I mean, I am not like dexterous enough to do that. So
it's taken years of practice. So now it's simple, but yeah.
Sure. So I would say, look, I mean, actually this is a designer top, I would say, so it fits with a pageant motif. And actually matching earrings as well, which I put on for our interview today.
I love it.
But actually more so, which is a little bit, kind of in the funky aspect, is I wish I actually was back in my office so I could show you the mounts that I have hanging up in my office, which everybody asks about when they come in, is I love insects. And in fact, when I was in high school, one of the, I would say, talents, if you call it that, was the ability to identify insects and actually read through taxonomic guides on different insects.
Oh my goodness.
And so I competed nationally, and at some point, definitely not now, was ranked top 5 in the country for being able to identify species of insects. So that was my claim to fame in high school. And
I love it.
So that to this day, if you have an insect infestation, whether it be termites, cockroaches, you're too scared to take care of it, just call me. I'm more than happy to.
Very, very good to know, and I feel like that's definitely a fun, weird talent that not many people can relate to. So I think that's awesome. So Nancy, before I say thank you and everything, because I've really loved this so much, so really thank you. But how can people get involved and really learn more about AWIP? What's the best way for them to learn more and volunteer and get involved?
Sure. So we've tried our best to make ourselves very available and searchable through social media or on the internet. So if you guys, so for those of you who are, data nerds like me and want to get your hands reading every possible thing, including our 2019 Future of Women study, where we found trends across 600 plus different women responding to our survey, you should visit our website, www.advancingwomeninproduct.org. Or if you're interested in following our recent posts, you can find us on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn page with over 3,000 followers. Also on Twitter, so at the AWIP. And we also have a Facebook group and a Facebook page. So those are all ways that you can get involved. And if you do visit our website, you also see the option to join our special mobilized platform, where members of AWIP get special discounts potentially to different courses, or they get mentoring programs as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to look more into it. But really, thank you for coming on to She Leads and just sharing what it's like to be such an inspirational, powerful leader in tech. I'm excited for others to hear and learn from you as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And for anybody who has any questions, feel free to email me. I am more than happy to, help out any way I can.
Perfect.